Greetings, friends, and welcome back to the Musings from the Mount podcast, where I explore the intersection of spirituality, psychology, and global consciousness. I'm your host, Joseph Carenza. In today's episode, Michael Lindfield and I dive into the mystical significance of the number 49, and we attempt to unravel the cosmic cycles of human evolution. From the Garden of Eden to our current era, we'll explore how each stage of our collective journey contributes to spiritual growth. Along the way, we investigate the esoteric meaning behind the rainbow bridge, the seven rays, and the roles of planets in our development. So join us as we begin our ascent up the mountain of wisdom. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider going to meditationmount.org and donating. Your donation helps us to bring you this podcast, as well as all the other programs the Mount produces, both today and in the future. We're incredibly grateful and honored by your support. All right, back to the podcast. And the number 49. Seven segments of seven. The number 49, 49 years, 49 fires, seven chakras. The cycle of completion. So for today's episode, which we are recording on my birthday, and I'm 49, we're talking about the number 49. And the way it divides and what it means. And it has a lot of esoteric trans-Himalayan significance in the mystery schools. And we've talked about that briefly here and there. But the exciting thing about this is it's far more interesting than you think of just a number, you know? Oh, yeah. So we're going to get into a little bit about it. But can you just introduce us to 49? Let's kick the tires.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, you and I sort of decide the day before, at the earliest, what the theme is going to be for the podcast recording. Mm. And this morning, I wasn't quite sure. Then I realized, it was your birthday. And I remember you saying, you're going to be 49. I thought, 49? That is a perfect number. It's the container. It holds everything. It's the number that holds the evolutionary unfoldment of the promise of our humanity. It's 7 times 7. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to look at that in different ways. We're going to go out there. It's going to be quite cosmic. And then I want to bring it right back into our own universe of self, because we actually have 49 subplanes. And so I want to look at the 7 colors of the rainbow, the 7 notes of the octave, even though an octave has 8. Octave is based on 8, but it's 7 plus the 1 again. It starts again. It's a spiral. So without getting too technical and too lost in numbers and out there in the cosmos, let's dream a little about what it means to be part of this great unfolding of the one life through its amazing geometry of incarnation. And so let's start with 49 being let's start with ourselves before we launch into the cosmos. It's said that we as human beings exist inside a spectrum of being. And the spectrum of being comprises 7 layers. Those layers are the physical, the emotional, the mental, the intuitive, and then it goes on right up to the monadic, the highest fire of all. So we have 7 planes, and those 7 planes are subdivided into 7 subplanes. So you could say that the constitution of our humanness is represented by these 49 steps, 49 stages. For instance, the physical plane has 7 planes to it. 4 of them are called dense, and 3 of them are called etheric. So life on Earth is lived here at the threshold between number 4 and number 3. Number 4 is the dense physical. So we live now in the 4th subplane of the physical. That's why you and I have a body that we can feel and It has substance. It's dense. The physical plane also has these more refined levels that we call invisible, although we know invisibility is simply just only from the human being's perspective. Nothing really is invisible. It just cannot be perceived by certain instruments that only can perceive certain frequencies. So our ability to perceive the more subtle realms is limited at the moment. So the higher three subplanes of the physical are what we call the etheric physical. So when we talk about the earth moving to the etheric, and we're going to no longer be living in dense physical bodies, we're going to be living in etheric bodies, it's still a physical aspect of incarnation, because we don't understand that the physical has these 7 levels of refinement. So without getting too technical, it simply means if that when you and I are no longer incarnated, we're not in the flesh, in the carne, in the flesh, we're in the subtle realms, then we're living in a different subplane. And when we incarnate, we come down into matter, because the whole idea is to use matter as the substance out of which we carve the beauty that's inherent and innate inside the dream of the planet and the dream of humanity. And then we have the emotional level that has 7. And then we have the mental level that has 7. And it's said that the lower mind is the lower 4, and the higher mind is the upper 3, which then brings us into the intuitive and the Buddhic plane. So these things are not all like separate, they're all interconnected, and yet we only can access them when our consciousness is vibrating at that frequency. We said this before, there are cipher locks on everything. And the only way to open something is to be in resonance with it. So in order to have access to the intuitive realm, the realm of the soul, we need to have opened the heart and have love flowing through, have compassion, have kindness, because those are the qualities and frequencies that live inside that domain, that realm, and therefore when we sound them, we have access. We can't be denied that which we are, but we can't access that which we are until we've grown into it. And so you look at the 7-fold nature of the human being. Now, if you step back and say, well, what about civilization? What about us as a species? You could look at this in 7 stages as well, Joey. And what is the human being? What is the human experience? It's said it is the incarnation of one aspect of this heavenly being. It has a human component. It has other components. But its human expression goes through this 7-fold cycle. So this is where we can sort of dip back and touch into some of the biblical story on the ageless wisdom, because we start with the Garden of Eden. That is the first cycle. And we're going to take us through 7 cycles now, and each with 7 subplanes. So the first cycle, which happened inside the Garden of Eden, is called the Adamic race. This is where masculine and feminine were merged as one, but a one that didn't know itself, a duality that didn't exist consciously. Masculine, feminine was part of this amorphous, unified field inside the Garden of Eden. And the Garden of Eden is simply that state of being before we entered time, space, and substance. And so you have the biblical story of in the Garden of Eden, Eve was created out of Adam by a rib. And I just don't want to say Adam was the man. I think Adam was the male-female.
That makes sense.
And what it was the separation. Otherwise, it gets, men were better because the woman was born out of man, and you get all this distortion. But for me, it was the unified field where its component parts were not yet separated out into their own entities.
Right.
So what happened, the way that this took place, was that in their innocence means this unknowing, but still the sense of oneness, Eve offered the male, the Adam, a fruit. And the fruit was an apple. But traditionally, if you go back to the biblical times and the biblical lands, that apple was a pomegranate.
Right.
Because the pomegranate represents the one and the many. You've got this one sphere, and inside it, you've got all these seeds representing the multiplicity and the multiform nature of the one. So what happened was, when they ate of the fruit, of the knowing, of the knowledge of good and evil, when I won't say good and evil, I would say they ate of the knowing and the experience of duality. And that's when they said, then they saw each other as naked, and, this is where the fig leaf came in, covering yourself, because you suddenly became self-conscious.
Right. Yeah, it's like the real beginning of humanness is that first feeling of separateness, that you were no longer, like, you weren't just the one.
No, you were two, and there was somebody else there.
Right.
And that somebody else was different, and I had to cover up my difference because I was self-conscious.
Right.
I mean, I'm taking liberties here, Joe, so extend me some poetic license.
Yeah, of course.
So what happened is, we weren't expelled from the Garden of Eden because we had sinned. Remember, the original root meaning of the word sin is separation.
Right.
So the sin in the Garden of Eden was we suddenly found ourselves in a separate identity, a you and a me, a man and a woman. We were no longer part of this fused state of oneness. But this oneness didn't know itself. So the whole idea of evolution is for the one life to know itself, to touch itself, to be itself in its fullness. So it has to go through this stage of separating itself from its original union, and then going on this journey of self-discovery, and then finding its way home back to the union.
Right.
And so what happened when we were not expelled, but by the mere fact that we, in the Garden of Eden, suddenly became aware of the dual aspect of life, the masculine and feminine. We then started this journey of experiencing it firsthand. And so where do we go after the Garden of Eden? It's said that the next civilization, the next race, was called Hyperborea, which was not a dense physical. It was still the upper levels of the physical, the etheric physical. So Hyperborea was a precursor to physical life on Earth. And it's where things started to take shape on the inner, so that when we showed up on the outer, we could be in more defined forms. It was a time of inner definition. And there are places where it's said that Lemuria came out of.
Okay.
Because that's the next.
Right.
So we're talking about Hyperborea. Hyperborea was this land in the etheric that was preparing to incarnate. So this incarnation of the species,
right,
it happened in Lemuria. Now, Lemuria, whether you say it was where we currently find Australia and New Zealand, or parts of Africa, or Lemuria was the time when we showed up physically for the first time and still had a remembrance of who we were. So that's why the Aboriginal traditions in Australia talk about dream time.
Right. Yeah.
Just as a young child, a baby that's just born still lives in dream time.
Yeah.
So they were connected to the one through dream time.
Yeah.
And then they developed this sensitivity inside the physical body to be aware of their surroundings. And therefore, their culture and their traditions honored the one because there was still a remembrance of the one, and they were learning what it was like to be the one in the body. And then I'm fast forwarding a little here to what came next.
Right.
Atlantis. Atlantis was a civilization that was intended to unfold the next cycle of these 7 cycles, the 3rd cycle, the 4th cycle. So from 3 was Lemuria, and 4th was Atlantis.
Right.
And that had to do with the feeling body, the emotional body, to be sensitive to. So we didn't just have a physical connection, we actually had a sensory connection. And then we developed psychic powers. And as we've mentioned before in these podcasts on several occasions, what happened in Atlantis, there was this golden age, this incredible apex of civilization where we had the ability to create and we had access to natural energy, magnetic energy, that was the etheric energy of the planet. And yet what we didn't have at the time was a developed sense of ethics and morals, and we weren't able to hold steady and hold true in the center of the being. And therefore we got swayed by power. And we've talked about the dissolution and the fall and the destruction of Atlantis was caused by the misuse of power in a way that disrupted not only human life, but it disrupted the planetary life. And when you disrupt parts of the system outside of yourself, then the person and the steward or the being in charge of it calls a timeout and said, no, this is not on.
Yeah.
You're in your own human classroom, but you are just about to take down the larger classroom of planet Earth. Sorry, we can't allow it. We're going to have you repeat. Okay?
Yeah.
So we're going to remove the classroom. We're going to have these cataclysms, which you've actually caused on the inner by your misuse of power. There's a huge buildup of karmic waves and pressure. We're going to let them be unleashed through the elements. And so it's said that there was this incredible deluge, this incredible breaking apart of Atlantis, because it was a boomerang effect. Everything that we had done to misuse power was stored up and it had to be released.
Yeah.
And when it was released, it broke the form. We went under. And this is where the Bible picks up the story.
Right. The flood, right? Yeah.
With the flood.
Yeah.
And Noah.
Yeah.
Well, where did Noah get the animals from? Well, they were from Atlantis.
Yeah.
And then when they sighted land, then you came into this new civilization, which really is being called different things: Indo-European, Aryan, not in the sense that it's been misused in the last century in Europe, but Aryan meaning everything that came out of of Asia, the Indo-European fusion. This configuration, this landmass, was here to take humanity to the next level. So we now entered the 5th cycle, which is the cycle of the development of the mind. And we see the development of the mind, how magnificent it is. And yet, when it becomes sovereign and we don't have the heart, it's a repeat of the issues and the problems we faced in Atlantis, when we had the power, but we didn't have the ethical alignment to use that power wisely. So now we have the mind, and we don't understand the mind is a tool in service of the soul, in service of something greater. So the mind is now attempting to be the king, the sovereign, and it sits on the throne and wants to rule. And we're basically trying to say, you do have a place, mind, but in order to rule properly, you have to go and live inside this palace called the heart. That's where you rule. And so we're learning the lessons of the development of the mind to the point where we have 2 functions of the mind. One is the analytical, it helps us to dissect and analyze and then put things back together so they make sense. And then we have the higher aspect of the mind, which is the beginning of the building of the bridge into the intuitive realm. Mm-hmm. And the building of the bridge is what is referred to in the Ageless Wisdom teachings as the building of the Antakarana, the rainbow bridge. Mm. And this is the bridge that's going to reconnect us with the fullness of who we are. It's going to give us a way of actually moving forward in evolution. And it will bring us into contact with the realm of souls. Now, if we just bring it back to the personal, when you and I are just focused in the mind, and the mind is not able to figure out what our destiny is, because it doesn't have access to that information, it's contained in the soul. The only way of accessing the soul is to build this rainbow bridge so that we can be in communication. And we often say that meditation is a way you can be online with the soul and receive the inspiration and the communications from the soul in your waking consciousness. So you become impressed by your soul. Your mind doesn't have to figure it out. Your mind, the higher mind receives, the lower mind can help make sense of things. But it's not your GPS. It's not what's going to give you direction. So here we go back to, where are we now? We're inside this fifth cycle, and we're inside the shift from 5 to 6. So we're in these cycles, we at the moment are about 5.5. And what we're moving into in this new age, in this new civilization, is the 6th cycle, which is the cycle in which intuition is born. And intuition is a natural way of connecting us and reconnecting us with everything. Therefore, it brings us back into harmony and resonance, and we find ourselves at peace, not only with ourselves, but with everything else. So this 6th race that's about to unfold in, thousands and thousands of years is called Pacificus, because it ushers in the era of peace, or the era of deep intuitive knowing. And then there is a 7th cycle later, which has to do with the will, where we have built up at this instrument through these 6 cycles, where the 7th civilization will create the final body so that the original dream can be realized, or has been realized, the full flowering of our humanity. So if you wonder, what on earth am I doing? Or you wake up each day, we're part of the unfolding of this incredible flower of humanity. And the flower of humanity is one of the petals in this great flower of the planet, which is a petal inside the great unfolding flower of the solar system, etc., etc. So it's all this nested universe of unfolding realities.
It's like generally we've gone from the forgetting, and now we're moving into the remembering.
You see, that's it. And when you go back to some of the stories of Osiris being dismembered and scattered through the universe, the whole object is to remember who we are. Go and collect the dismembered aspects to remember ourselves, not just cognitively, but to put ourselves back together on all levels, so that the remembering is a coming back into a knowing of our oneness. But this time, it's a conscious knowing, not just an amorphous sense. And so that's why we talked about the homecoming and the return of the prodigal child to the original house of spirit.
Yeah.
It's all about the homecoming. And when we come home to ourselves, let's go back to the pomegranate, okay? In the Garden of Eden. Imagine every seed inside that pomegranate contains a pomegranate tree. And that pomegranate tree has lots of pomegranates. And inside every pomegranate is a seed. It's this endless cascading of the one into the many. Now, when we have completed the cycle of our humanity, the original pomegranate in the Garden of Eden is this self-realized fruit, because every seed has gone on its journey and come back home and known itself to be at one with the one pomegranate.
Yeah, I had not thought of it that way, but that is really interesting, because that's also God, that's the whole journey, isn't it?
It is the whole journey, and I'm not sure whether this is it's time or we have the time to do it. But
Sure.
I remember before we talked about the one and the many.
Yeah.
And I know I'd shared with you something that I wrote. God, when was it? It was way back 11 years ago. It's called The Dance of the One and the Many, and it encapsulates the journey I've just described. So let me just read it, because it may help to bring a little bit of synthesis. Once again, this is poetic. This is so if you want to fact check this, not possible. This is my poetic interpretation of it. The One slumbered through the cosmic night in a state of unknowing and dreamlike amorphous unity. The I Am sensed, but did not know itself. And with the dawn of a new cosmic day, it stirred and stretched and dreamily imagined infinite possibilities as the desire to be burned deep within its heart. Then, through an act of will, the One fractured itself into 1 billion pieces and sent them on their way into the fields of time and space as pilgrims on a journey of self-discovery. Having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. Over time, the separated parts awoke, looked around, and beheld others, never realizing the true nature of this other. Inside the encapsulation of the separated self, each aspect experienced the power of the isolated I. Through a series of relationships with that which lay outside, an identity of a me and a you was born. And then with faltering steps, the I am that made its painful and persistent progress along the path. The long journey of ceaseless striving for humanity as the prodigal child had now begun in earnest. Deep within the heart of the separated self, a cry for wholeness welled up and issued forth. And slowly the parts began to see themselves in each other, until an understanding dawned within the consciousness of the fractured body of humanity that there is no other. There is only the one soul. Imagine the euphoria of this spiritual homecoming coursing through the group field as the soul whispers in our inner ear. There is no inside or outside, no me or you, no above or below for the mind to grasp. There is only a sublime state of at-oneness suffused with joy and permeated with a profound and fiery love that knows no bounds. So the mystery of being registers and awakens in the human heart through a deep, co-resonant communion with that presence we call a greater love. It's the heart of hearts, and it lives inside each human heart as the seed and the promise of our true sovereign self. So the last chapter. Then finally, when the day has come, the I am that I am will emerge as the one who knows itself as one with itself, a result of all the probations, trials, and weary steps taken throughout the ages upon the long and thorny path of self-realization. The secret of this ultimate reunion is hidden in the phrase, synthesis is, but unity must be created. Lives within lives, wheels within wheels, and journeys within journeys, all in constant communication and co-creative communion. everything is a sacred fractal of the one life. Everything is essentially divine. What inspired me was this realization, Joey. We're on this incredible journey of self-realization, that the only way the one can know itself is through us. And we've forgotten that we are the manifold expression of the one, because we've come into this isolation, which is necessary in order for us to build a sense of self. But that self is only a temporary step on the path. And then the I realizes it's part of something greater, and we start build community, and we move from I to we. And then we realize that we is not just a collection of I's, but the we is a greater expression and a greater identity of who we truly are. It's the group I. A we is a group I.
Yeah.
It keeps going. That's how I'm holding it now. I mean, once again, we have to put in my disclaimer, please don't believe a word I say unless it resonates in your heart, or if you're willing to test it as a working hypothesis in the alchemical laboratory of daily life. But anyway, Joey, I've spoken a lot, and you sort of prompted a whole flow of stuff out there. I'm not sure how coherent it was, but
it was great.
When you think of, oh my gosh, I'm 49 years old today inside of this incarnation on a planet that itself is moving through its own evolution, part of a solar system moving through its evolution, how do you hold this great cosmic story that we're part of inside the daily reality of your life as Joey?
That's a very good question. And even before I started looking into this cycle of 49, it really felt like this was the completion of a first life. This was, and I've talked about this with Callie and a couple other people, but it feels like this is the beginning of this, the second act of the second part of my life in a way that I wasn't really expecting, in the sense that it does feel like a door has closed, and not in the kind of like, that over the hill, or that, because honestly, I feel like I'm just kind of getting started, and I feel invigorated, and I have this completely new path of which I started on. And it is interesting how it coincides with all these different numerological things happening at the same time. There's a Pluto return of our country. There's, there's all of these things that are lining up, and it just so happens to be the completion of this 49th cycle around the sun, and it dovetails right into what you were saying. And I really liked, I had never really thought about the Osiris angle, and also the idea of the pomegranate with all those different seeds, and how each seed is, this experience of, the Platonic ideal, and I really, that really resonated with me.
Well, because otherwise it's just a concept.
Yeah.
It's not a realization.
Yeah.
And the whole idea of humanity can only flower when it's realized itself.
Yeah, and when you start to, it kind of can blow your mind a little bit when you start to think about how genetically, how closely we are actually all related. Like, there's 8 billion of us on this planet, but we're actually, you don't have to go that far back before you start finding super common relatives. And then you realize, oh wow, we're all just these experiences, if you go back far enough, of the one.
Yeah. But look at the body we're occupying at the moment. Our bones, as Carl Sagan says, we're made out of stardust. Well, our bones have got matter from the cosmos, from meteors, from all these wonderful comets and other planetary beings and bodies that have, merged with the atmosphere of Earth. We've got our emotional realm, which has a sensitivity, which is developed through what was learned in the vegetable realm. And then we've got a basic instinctual body and ability to take care of ourselves through the animals. And then we've got higher components of ourselves as we understand the angelic realms.
Yeah.
And the more refined aspects. And it's said that we have all of this in one. We have the angelic realm inside of us. We have the mineral, we have the vegetable, we have the animal. The human is a meeting place of everything. We talked about this before. This is the first time that all aspects, the whole rainbow of possibilities is in one encapsulation.
Yeah.
And that's why it says in the Bible, we're made in the image and likeness of the Creator. We contain within us the whole sphere of possibility and promise that is inside the Creator. We, if you like, we're bots. We're organic bots doing the will, but we're not just unconscious bots. The fractal really is a scalar version of the one.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, look at it that way.
Yeah. I like that. That resonates with me. We're reconstructing, we're remembering. And I feel like for me, that has really taken over. In the more traditional, like a Orthodox version of, you don't start studying the Kabbalah until you're 40. You're supposed to be married, very stable. So I almost feel like, it's like there's something that happens in this particular part of your life where you start to look to these concepts and these ideas. And it feels like a very natural kind of transition.
Well, because you've got 7 times 7, which is 49, and we've got the 7 rays again. We've got the 7 colors. We talked about the rainbow. Yeah. We talked about the rainbow bridge. But what are these 7 rays? We talk about we're the 7th ray and the 4th ray and the 2nd ray. We're a 2nd ray. These aren't just colors. These are embodiments of cosmic consciousness. An energy can't exist unless it's embodied. Mm-hmm. So we are the embodiment of an energy, and the embodiment is to give it form. Mm-hmm. So how does the one know itself? It has to show up in time and space and substance. Mm-hmm. This is what you and I are doing right now. We're showing up in time, space, and substance.
Yeah,
and you're just about to start your next orbit around the sun. Mm-hmm. But I go back to, if we think of the 7 rays, not just as the 7 colors of this cosmic palette, but as beings. In the Bible, they're called the 7 spirits before the throne of God. Mm-hmm. They're living presences.
Yeah.
Now, in the 5th realm, the realm of souls, which is the next one, we're in the 4th realm, and we are evolving to take our place in the 5th realm. And we do that by mastering what it means to be a human being through total immersion and non-attachment.
Mm. Yeah, that's important.
And that's the tricky one. Total immersion, non-attachment.
Yeah. You're all in, but also don't hold on.
Which why it says it's be in the world, but not of it.
Right.
So we have these 7 rays, and in the realm of souls, it's said that this 5th kingdom is, if you like, is the microcosmic embodiment of all the 7 rays. And there is a being that embodies each of these rays inside the 5th kingdom, and then around them are people who are the sub-rays, because it's said that there are 49 colors to the projection of the divine plan on earth. 49 component parts.
Yeah.
49 parts to Osiris. 49 things to be remembered and put together again. No, I mean, we're talking about 49 as a symbolic number. But it said there are 49 ashrams, the 49 fires inside the 5th realm. And then there is this one fire that holds the whole thing together, the one synthetic fire that is the fire of love that holds the whole of the 5th kingdom together, or the 5th realm together, and that's called traditionally Christ consciousness, or the Christ, which, as we've said before, predates Christianity. We're talking about an embodied consciousness that's able to hold the microcosm of the macrocosm. So the 5th realm really represents the heart of the planet, because the heart is that which connects us with everything else in this scalar universe. It's the heart that connects me to you. It's the heart that connects me to the minerals and the vegetables and the plants and the birds and the animals. It's the heart that connects me to the invisible realms, the devas. It's the heart that connects me to the cosmos as a living being. I lie in bed and look out of my window at night and I see stars. And these are not just dots on some canvas. These are living beings in dense physical form. They have more refined levels of being. And because Earth is the densest form in which this level of consciousness lives, when we look out, we don't see other beings, other human-like beings on other planets sort of waving to us, because they reside on more refined levels. The way that we get in touch with the residents and the resident consciousness of the planets is to raise our level to the frequency. So what does it mean? It means that I have to understand what love is. I have to understand all the different qualities, because each of the rays is connected with a planet. And once again, I don't want to get tied up in technicalities, but just to illustrate it, ray 1, which has to do with will and power, the life element, is connected with Vulcan. And people say, Vulcan, what's that? Well, Vulcan is an undiscovered planet awaiting discovery that is said to be between the Sun and Mercury. And people say, well, I don't believe. Well, people didn't believe in Pluto, but it was always there.
Right.
When it was discovered doesn't mean it wasn't there before.
That's right.
It was discovered. It's always discovered at a very critical time. Pluto was discovered just before we went into the age of the atomic age. And plutonium. Right. Vulcan is about to be discovered. And Vulcan is that which fashions the earthly elements through the fire of heaven. It's the divine smith. And it says that when you are under the influence of Vulcan, you are being smithered.
Okay.
You're being hammered and heated and shaped. And shaped into fashion. The second ray, the ray of love wisdom, is connected with Jupiter. And Jupiter is Jove, which it has to do with joy. And second ray of love, wisdom, and joy. The third ray of active intelligence is Saturn. The fourth ray of harmony through conflict is Mercury. And Mercury, as we've said before, is this intermediary between heaven and earth, because 4 is always the link, the pivotal point between the upper and the lower. And then the fifth, which is this scientific approach, and science not being this cold mechanical, but science being the understanding through knowledge of the universe, is connected with Venus. And we said before that it's interesting that Venus describes love as pure reason.
Yeah.
So the scientific articulation of love is pure reason,
right?
Which means it's why everything is. So carrying on, the sixth ray of idealism and devotion is Neptune. And the seventh ray is Uranus. So they've been linked. And these planets also are living beings. We just see them as physical bodies, just like when we're walking through a town or a city or a neighborhood, we see other people and we just see them as bodies walking around. We fail to realize that is the Creator walking around in a body that is so far created.
Yeah.
This is a work in progress. And this is why we go back to the whole thing of essential divinity here at Meditation Mount. Can we, when we meet somebody, recognize, no matter what they look like and sound like and feel like on the outside, can we realize that on the inside they are essentially divine?
Absolutely. That's the key, isn't it? I mean, and that's meditation. That gives you that space between the notes to really see that it's all the same instrument. And I really, for me, that's really become embodied in this 49th year.
Well, yeah. So we know that as you grow, think of a plant. I mean, the plants are great. Because the plants don't have free will, they don't say, I don't want to grow, or I don't want to be heliotropic and reach towards the sun. No, they're programmed because life is always reaching for expansion of itself and the revelation of itself. So if you think of the plants always turning their face to the sun, they're heliotropic.
Yeah.
We have that same tendency inside of us, but we don't know where to look. If you think of the soul as the inner sun, then for us to become heliotropic is the personality to begin to turn its face towards the sun that is the soul.
Right.
And when you do that, you're called by the magnet of your soul, and that magnet starts to build this relationship. And the relationship, as we just said, is established by building the rainbow bridge.
Yeah.
So that's the way you come into resonance with more of who we are, but also it's a way of giving energy. You think of solar power and battery power. For instance, if I'm using my cell phone today, I'm going to have to recharge it. There are people who live near here who got e-vehicles. They're going to have to recharge them. So just as e-vehicles and smartphones need regular recharging because they don't have unlimited power, our personal lives can also enter the red zone. I can feel depleted one day. I get a low battery sign flashing on my being and I need to rest. I need to do something. So where do I get the energy from? It's not, do I just put a solar panel on Michael? Well, no, I have access to solar power, SOULAR. It's in the soul because the soul is beaming energy from the cosmos. So once I get online with the soul and get in touch with what we described in an earlier podcast, psychic energy, the actual chi, the life force itself, I'm plugged in. I don't need a battery. I am online.
Yeah.
However, because we live in a physical body that is not solar powered, it still needs to eat, rest, exercise. We've got to take care of it. However, we can bring the gifts of the soul into the physical body. We can, once we are in touch with our higher destiny and are inspired, inspiration brings energy. To be inspired means to be filled with spirit, inspire. So we're filled with spirit, we're filled with psychic energy. So that's why when you suddenly get inspired, you have all the energy in the world to do it. And then when you're not inspired, you feel like a sack of potatoes.
That is very true. And it's part of my Fit by 50 routine I've been working at for the past couple of years to really bring, my whole body, mind, and spirit in line and in shape and ready to serve. That's been my whole goal is because I have noticed that you have to really take. In me personally, I can't function unless my body's in a certain kind of condition. My brain just parts of my brain don't work, and when I do, it's like when you get that space ready, when you leave that place open for reception, man, everything comes back. It's starting to come back online, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's said that there's a difference between tiredness and tension. The inner tension of being inspired, there's this energy flowing through. There's a tense energy, not tension of a nervous tension of an emotional or mental nature.
Yeah, like the potential energy.
It's the potential energy. Yeah. It's potential energy. And you named that you have to keep your instrument to go together. Yeah. So I'd like to name, I know we're coming to the end of our podcast today because all good things come to an end. There are some things that actually cut the cord, that destabilize the internet connection between soul and personality, that cut us off from inspiration, that cut us off. And these have been named there are several of them, but the ones that are always renamed and stated in Agni Yoga are doubt, fear, and self-pity. Fear freezes us. And fear cuts us off from power, not just our own power, but the power of the universe. So the easiest way to disarm somebody is to put them in fear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How do you disarm a population? You create fear.
That's right.
And we're seeing that all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
And then self-pity. If I'm self-pity, I am so... It's a form of unconscious narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just self-pity. I'm self-absorbed.
Yeah.
If I'm self-absorbed, I can't absorb the greater sphere of life.
That's right. Yeah.
Therefore, I'm cut off. Oh, woe is me. I am a victim.
Yeah.
And as a victim, I can't draw upon the strength of my sovereign self. So let's come back to doubt. But first of all, just say that all of these things are necessary, because one of the things that Agni Yoga says, remember, all obstacles placed in your path are gifts. How else could you develop your strengths without overcoming obstacles? There is no other way. And I'd like to quote, this is a quote from Sloka, which is the paragraph 504 from Aum, A-U-M. And he's saying, look, one ought to test all useful qualities. It's not enough to imagine courage, tolerance, and devotion, and all that goes to make up the armor of achievement. He is not a fit leader who has not proved fearless in action. Each one can imagine himself brave, but in action it often turns out to the contrary. One needs to oppose oneself to great terror in order to prove to oneself whether or not fear can creep in. When I speak about gross dependence upon obstacles, I have in mind such testings in actions. And he goes on to basically say, there's a lot of people who say they're brave, but they run at the first sign of... There's a difference between saying something and being it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what they talk about doubt, and I just want to maybe complete this cycle with doubt. In Agni Yoga, it's called the worm of doubt. Always the worm of doubt. It says, the worm of doubt is a very indicative symbol. Actually, the worm is similar to a bacillus, which decomposes psychic energy and influences even the composition of the blood. In times to come, scientists will reveal the psychic and physical peculiarities of the man who falls into doubt. The effects of the disease of doubt are among the most infectious. From the first years of childhood, the best prophylaxis against doubt should be employed. A healthy, rational, inquiring mind does not engender doubt. But any ignorance can be the source of the most ugly doubts. Doubt is primarily ugliness. And finally, it leads to betrayal. The epidemic of betrayal is already a planetary calamity. Thus, out of an insignificant worm grows a most frightful dragon.
Wow.
I read that this morning.
Ooh,
that was part of my study this morning. I went, wow. Doubt creeps in and it undermines everything.
It sure does.
And the thing about ugly, because when truth is revealed in form through love, we have beauty. Doubt doesn't allow that revelation.
Mm-hmm.
Doubt basically takes us out of the game as co-creative agents.
Yeah.
I can't be inspired to have doubt. There's like a black cloud hanging over me.
Mm-hmm.
I've been there. It's called depression.
Yeah.
And therefore, I'm off the game board for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I think we need all souls on deck at the moment, Joey, on this planet.
Oh, I agree with that.
All souls on deck, and the way that we open up to the needs of the world is through the heart.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure. we've covered a lot, and I just wonder if there's anything else that you think we should cover, or if you have any closing thoughts on this your birthday.
Oh, for me, I went through a process of gratitude with Kelly this morning, just going through all the things that I was grateful for and that we were grateful for, and just the fact that we're able to be here, excuse me, and to be of service, and that's really, I realized my whole life has been about being of service, but it wasn't as mindful as it is now. It wasn't as intentional. And I think that's the culmination of the beginning of now this new cycle for me is much more intentional.
I guess, thank you, Joey, what you've named is incredibly important. And the early stages of service is still a little bit, I've experienced, the whiffum, what's in it for me?
Mm-hmm.
It's a natural thing, what's in it for me? And then when that's let go of, and you truly serve the common good and everyone else, you actually receive more than you could if you try to game the system.
Yeah. And that's true. And just as I was, we take the dog Sunny to the beach every morning because she has to run or she's a maniac. And, I'm up to my knees in the ocean throwing this ball. And she's, it's an hour of intense, just, an 80-pound German Shepherd who's just a ball of energy. And I'm just, it's just, wow, this is amazing. This is I couldn't have created this if I had been intentionally trying to just do this one thing. But when I let go of everything, this presented itself. And I'm so grateful for it. So grateful to be here.
Well, we've said that when you hold on to something with clenched fists can neither give nor receive.
Mm-hmm.
When you give with open heart and open hands, you're part of giving and receiving, which, as we said before, when they happen simultaneously, is flow. So we become part of a greater flow, the great chain of being, the great chain of blessing. So how do we show up as souls on earth, full of inspiration, light, and love? Plato once said, we can easily forgive a child who's afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when people are afraid of the light.
Yeah.
So how do we come from out under the rock of self-pity and doubt and stand in the true sun of our sovereign self? And
it's an invitation to come back home, to begin to remember.
And it goes back to that invitation by one of the teachers who said, okay, be like the sun.
Mm.
Give freely of your gifts of warmth and brightness, asking nothing in return.
All right.
Well, many happy returns.
All right. Thank you. All right. That was great. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you next week. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Joey.
All right.